This video is for business leaders who are thinking they should pivot to survive, diversify, or expand their business, but aren't sure if, when, or how they should do it. Watch to the end of this video for bonus material on proactive planning for a pivot and a recommended video called Frames for Entrepreneurs to help you stay in action until you reach success or pivot towards it. So in 1974, the company Pixar was founded, and they lost money, or that company lost money until its initial public offering, which took place on November 29th of 1995, after critics anticipated that Disney's Christmas release of Toy Story in Christmas of 95 would be a blockbuster hit. So it took the critics anticipating the success of Toy Story and essentially 21 years for Pixar to go from money hemorrhaging company basically on the edge of death through most of its history, even though it had some of the most innovative people that we know in modern history behind them, including Ed Catmull, Steve Jobs, and others who were pioneers in their own fields. But it only took a mere 21 years from them to go from being unprofitable to profitable. And in that year, Toy Story grossed $373 worldwide. So it worked out. It just took a mere 23 years for that to happen. So whatever your reason for pivoting, knowing when, how, and how to pivot towards success is critical. I spent 10 years in product licensing and almost retired in 1986. I would have been a 48-year-old millionaire, but the deal didn't go through. And that was the difference between hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and $0. So that's how quickly things can change in the real world of business and innovation. So then in April 2020, my largest teaching contract ended as COVID spread through Japan. So I decided to pivot into consulting. So I've been keeping the lights on since then by teaching as I grow my business, my relationships, and my reputation as a consultant. That's going well, but until that becomes, until I can make that full time and let go of the teaching, you got to do what you got to do. So most businesses take longer to reach profitability than founders expect, just as Pixar did. So in the meantime, as leaders, we have to balance quitting too soon against continuing too long with something that isn't yet working. And where that balance is not easy to calculate or determine. Excuse me, but we can do some strategies to help us do that. So how long you should continue before pivoting has no clear answer other than the definitive, it has to be sometime before you go bankrupt or become homeless. But obviously that's a terrible criteria, and we want something that's going to happen before that. So when you do, and if you do decide to pivot towards promising or proximal, which is just a way of saying near, or related areas to retain value if possible. So if you have something that you're doing and you've gained value, such as I have in my neurocognitive leadership, taking that same knowledge, that same expertise, that same reputation, and applying it, it's diverse, so it can be applied to marketing, but it can also be applied to leadership coaching. It can be applied to training. So there's a lot of different directions I could pivot in if I needed to, but in my current position as a consultant, I can do any of those things. I decide exactly how I approach my services based on the needs of my customer. In fact, someone said to me the other day, I bought this machine for $3,000 and I didn't need it. And it didn't even occur to me. It was like, well, I won't sell you anything you don't need. I'll let you define what you need and then let you know whether I can help you. If I cannot, I will not waste your time. So that's an important thing. Essentially, when you sell products or services that leverage the value of what you've built previously, it allows you to perhaps pivot your income or pivot your opportunities if what you're doing after a specific period of time, which can basically only be determined by you and your resources, becomes an issue. But you shouldn't wait until desperation to have a plan in place. And I'll be getting to that in the bonus material. So the hardest decision when it comes to pivoting really is when you need to pivot. We're in a culture where never give up is a good thing. And that's true. Most people who don't have grit, who don't persevere well beyond what is probably what most people would think of as a reasonable time to quit, most people who quit within a reasonable time never become successful at that thing that was challenging. Conversely, as I said, you don't want to wind up homeless or bankrupt or whatever really adverse situation coming about. You need to balance those very complex variables, and they're very complex. If you have $1 million, if you have millions of dollars, like Steve Jobs did when he got involved in Pixar, if he wasn't a multimillionaire, when he got involved, he spent $5 million acquiring the technology rights to Pixar and their technology. And then he spent another $5 million of personal investment for operating or whatever it was into the company itself. And if you've read the book Creativity Inc., the author, I believe it was Ed Catmull, talks about how there was repeated injections of cash up to the point where it became a significant or perhaps even the majority of Steve Jobs' personal wealth that went into Pixar before they made a cent. So if you're not in a position like that, it could be fundamentally different as to when you pivot and if you pivot. If you can wait 5 or 10 or 20 years to be profitable, maybe you don't have to pivot. You just need to keep going. So to do something that's realistic and is scientific and objective, what you need to do is you need to determine for yourself what I would call pivot pointers. That is criteria based on time. That is, how much time are you willing to put in, or how much time do you need to do something new if that's the case. Your feelings, if you hate doing what you're doing, if I didn't love what I'm doing now, I wouldn't continue it after 2 years of not really making any significant income, but I do love it and I think it's working and I have indications of that. My feelings, as well as my objective assessment, the relationships I've developed, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback saying you are on the right track. And the last thing is, so you're looking at criteria that is based in time, in feelings, in process, and in circumstances. I pivoted from doing all teaching to doing the consulting as a result of COVID-19 and saying, okay, this is a good opportunity to pivot away from something I'm not wanting to do anyway, and then do something that is locationless and isn't dependent on being there in person. So it really comes down to you as your board of directors, as your company, you as the leader, deciding those two critical factors, when and how to pivot. That doesn't mean there isn't important criteria, and you should set those criteria long before you need to consider whether you need to do that or not, at least ideally. So the exact direction and destination and details for your business will be specific. And if you don't have those, at least have, I recently read a book called Do Over by John Acuff. Excellent book. I really enjoyed it. And he talked about having a fuzzy direction. That is, if you have some sense of where you want to wind up, regardless of your current business position, an exact direction is better. That is, you know, you have a clear end goal and you know how to head there. But pivoting is that redirection, that adjusting your compass heading is an example of a pivot. Adjusting your navigation towards a clear destination, that's much easier if you have that. Now, somebody I recently talked to said they don't have it. That's not terrible. Their business is doing well, but they're finding that it may start to, that it is becoming an interfering influence on where the future of their business is going. So maybe what they need to do is pivot towards finding a specific direction. So after you've decided when you need or and how you need to pivot, you need a pivot procedure. Or again, you can leave it to the last minute and panic and just hope you make it through. And if you're really creative, maybe you can do that. But again, having a plan, at least a structure, some kind of framework in place so that you know what to do when that situation comes up will put you in a better position and make you much more likely to succeed. And I would reference again COVID-19 for this. If you have no idea and something hits you out of the blue, the statistics, I don't know exactly what they are, but a tremendous amount of businesses failed as a result of COVID because the people most likely to fail were the ones who didn't have any other plans in place, which is probably the majority. And the ones that did were either very neuroadaptive, as I like to call it. They were adaptive and agile and figured something out on the fly before their business failed. And then some small portion of them already had some plans in place because they had anticipated, what could we do if we couldn't do this? Now that's the exception. But if you want to increase the odds of your current business succeeding and growing, you should be that exception. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it stacks the odds more in your favor against those who do no such planning. So you want to create, as far as your procedure, your pivot procedure goes, it could even be as general of a framework as, if my company is unable to deliver X product or X service, I will take, followed by concrete steps that you can take immediately based on your collective skill sets and resources. We will hire a consultant. We will go into this parallel or related field, or we've already built some relationships so that we can then change from a brick and mortar distributor or store or retail space to a digital space, or shift more of your business from the brick and mortar to the digital, or vice versa. Having some actions you can take immediately before there's a crisis immediately puts you cognitively in a far better space. And you've already got some steps you can take. That is, okay, we know the first few steps and we know the steps we need to take to figure out the following steps because you have a concrete, specific plan for doing so. That we call your pivot procedure. So, and then finally, and this is the most important part, is pull the trigger. I know many businesses with very good business leaders who are very successful, but even they, the majority I have talked to, and I talk to a lot of business people, a lot of business leaders who struggle to take action on their plans. So whether you're pivoting or not, you're guaranteed to fail if you don't take action on your plans. Plans mean fuck all if they're never acted upon. I find far more people, especially in this sort of mythological current space of, if you have the perfect plan, everything will work out. That's a lie. That just is based on ignorance, arrogance, and a delusion of grandeur. There's no such thing as a perfect plan. There are too many completely unknowable variables, but the better you have a clear destination and can adapt and have a plan framework in place and then act upon that plan. But any plan not acted upon is a dream and a wish and nothing more. It really sounds kind of silly and obvious. It's like, well, what do you mean? Of course you have to. It's stupid to even discuss the idea of making a plan you don't want to act on. But ask yourself, how many plans do you have that you have not yet acted upon? Was it because you were unable to, you lacked the resources, or you simply haven't done it? And I can bet from many years of experience and many years of human experience, as well as knowledge about this is clone week. And one of the things we are, whether you like it or not, is by default, we're lazy because that saves us energy. There are many things we can do that we know we should do that we don't do. And it's not for any other reason, primarily, then that's our evolutionary default. And by choice, we just don't. We would rather do something comfortable than something challenging that we're capable of that we know we should do. So oftentimes more people and more leaders struggle with taking action than making plans. Plans are easy. They take no responsibility, and there's no chance of failing at a plan you've never acted on. As a result of this, as I said, I've seen more successful business leaders stuck from a lack of action than any other single thing. So that's it for the standard content, and welcome to the bonus content. So let's get real. Virtually nobody plans a pivot. I've already sort of foreshadowed this earlier in this video. If we thought that the work we're doing right now was not going to be effective or was not going to work, we would just do something else. Excuse me. Take a drink here. Okay, so obviously what we're doing now is either working, or we believe it is heading in the direction of the success and the goals we want, or we would just do something else. Again, silly and obvious. Yet our chances of success would go up, excuse me again, if we only asked some questions that most business leaders at any level, in any size of organization, rarely ask. Stuff like, what will I or we do if this doesn't work? Now, too many years of this, the secret bullshit, has distracted us from the scientifically validated business practices and strategies of things like proactive planning. If you go, well, I don't want to think about the idea of failure because the universe will get the message. That is entirely scientifically dreamy horseshit based on no real data. I can assure you of that. We can debate it if you want, but it's a waste of time if you believe otherwise. The universe doesn't actually care what you do, and it neither works for, toward, or against your thoughts or goals. The universe cares about your goals and your thoughts and what you put in your head all the time about as much as you care about the hairs on your head or the microorganisms that live in your body. You aren't even aware of them. The universe to the microorganisms are to us what we are to the universe. It doesn't know or care. It is indifferent to your outcomes. The way you think and your optimism and focusing on positive things, that's for you, not the universe. Also, thinking of possible negative outcomes or alternatives if what you're doing now doesn't work. And it has been repeatedly by many of the most successful people in the world demonstrated, and in the academic research, things like pre-mortems, which I did in a recent video. Planning for both success and failure increase your probability of success over planning optimistically, blindly, and unrealistically only for success. That's just the fact. You can look it up if you don't believe me. So the most successful leaders in many industries plan pivots or plan for alternatives. If X happens, we will do Y proactively. And that's why they're still in business. So imagine how many more businesses might have survived the COVID pandemic if they had considered what they'd do if they couldn't deliver their product or service in person. Most of the companies that died, and that's many, and my heart goes out to them, didn't anticipate anything like this. And even the ones that have survived probably didn't either. But hopefully we've learned from this, and we could say, what could we do if our product is normally delivered in person? Is there an alternative? Skype had already been around for years. Zoom blew up, probably as a result of COVID. The technology was always there and people didn't use it in that way. Not because it wasn't possible, but because they had never taken their minds there. And it took a global pandemic for people to go, oh, well, we can do meetings and training digitally if needs be, and needs were, right? Another thing you can ask yourself is what parts of my business are outside of my control? So if you don't manufacture your own product, that's outside your control. What would happen if one of the materials tripled in price? Would that destroy your business? Could you think ahead of alternative materials that could replace that? Do you have or could you anticipate and plan for alternative manufacturers if your manufacturer suddenly triples their price because they think you're completely dependent on them? And my bet is if you are selling a manufactured product, you are completely dependent because you haven't even considered the idea that maybe it would be good to have an alternative manufacturer, or at least pivot plans, a pivot procedure. If our manufacturer becomes untenable or unable to produce our product, here's the steps we will take. Having that ready puts you in the right mindset to move forward immediately and get the psychological momentum you need that is most desirable to keep it sort of within your power to get those manufacturers if you haven't already examined the ones that you could switch to tomorrow. And you can do that by having that pivot procedure. What about the delivery of your product? If it can't be delivered in the way it's being delivered now, could you imagine another method or vendor to deliver it? How about the technology? What if the technology changes, if the technology tomorrow that you rely on becomes that you're selling becomes worthless because a superior technology comes out and you either have to license it at a fee you can't afford to compete, or makes your technology irrelevant? What would you do? You can think about that now. That has nothing to do with taking your eye off the ball of your current business. This is giving you flexibility and pivot power, let's call it that you could tap into having thought about these things before it became a crisis. So what could you do immediately in the medium or long term, or even the immediate, medium, or long term in terms of changing vendors or doing things yourself that you're not doing yourself for yourself if you had to? Think about it. You can think about these, you can answer the questions or start a trajectory on that path and just leave it there. It's better than what most people have done right now, which is nothing. Despite the lessons from COVID, I imagine your business and most businesses haven't even thought of what they would do if conditions suddenly and radically changed again, as they did for COVID. So another question you could ask is, what other products could we sell related to our core strengths if we couldn't sell our current products? Simple question to ask. Ask it. Think of some solutions and answers to that. Almost done. We got lots of questions, actually. What other markets could we sell to tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year if we had to or wanted to? So this could be just about expanding your business, but by simply anticipating the probability of if the market you're currently selling to disappeared or shrank radically, do you have an inkling where you would sell next? Do you know your next step, like tomorrow's step, even if it is simply research that stuff? If you do, you're probably 1 or 2 or 10 steps ahead of the average business leader and the average business period, regardless of size, status, or prestige. Next, ask, what could we do to make income tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, if we needed or wanted to? So let's imagine all your income, wherever it comes from right now, was wiped out tomorrow. It disappeared. What is your shortest path to income based on the resources you have, the inventory you have, the skill sets you have, all of your resources of all kinds, human, physical, know-how, knowledge, everything. How could you turn that into another stream of income if you had to tomorrow? Simply thinking about this question puts you in a better position for the future, as I said, for either expanding your business or simply pivoting when the world changes in a way you didn't anticipate. You've already got a possible solution waiting rather than having to react, you proact it. Let me give you an example. There was a fellow that I met online who was actually thriving in what he had done. He was a restaurateur, and when COVID hit and basically restaurants closed down, he went, you know what? Kitchen spaces have value outside of being a restaurant. If customers can't come to us, why don't we rent out our kitchen space so that even if it's for home delivery of meals, right? Like Uber Eats or whatever's the sort of local thing where you are, or caterers or other people who still can deliver food, prepare and deliver food, but maybe don't have a place for it. So could you connect caterers and people who need a commercial food preparation space with restaurateurs who now have empty kitchens that are doing nothing? So he effectively created something akin to the Airbnb of connecting professional level restaurant kitchens with people who did food prep, who many had actually pivoted to the idea of home delivery of food that would have otherwise been their restaurant. Or maybe they can't do a restaurant, but if they had access and could rent a kitchen by the hour or by the day, they could then build a business from that, and the restaurant could then make income from renting their kitchen for the customers they no longer have. Even a few days a week, and then another few days a week, they could make their own meals and home deliver them themselves. So it's just the idea of being not only adaptive, but saying, what would we do if we couldn't have our restaurant open? What resources do we have and how can we apply them? That's proactive pivot plans. So planning for pivots before the fact will only increase your odds of success. The universe couldn't care less either way, whether you live or die, thrive, succeed, or fail. But your chances of succeeding, as they say, chance favors the prepared, or chance favors the prepared mind. So in in reference to this thing I'm talking about, the universe not caring, I'm what you call an optimistic nihilist. I will put a link to the video there. This is not the recommended video, but it's a brilliant video I love from Kurzgesagt. And I know I'm saying that wrong. Sorry to my German-speaking friends who taught me that I can't still say it. But the recommended video for today is Frames for Entrepreneurs. This is a superpower for a lot of entrepreneurs who, once they do business one way, struggle when suddenly that way no longer works. The main thing they need to change is their mindsets, their behavior, and their frames, which is the main thing preventing them from planning and taking action when they have no choice but to pivot. So I'll put Frames for Entrepreneurs right there. That is the recommended video for the day. And please share this video with anybody who is struggling, whether or when or how to pivot in their business. This has been Crush It Club 265, Pivot Points, when, why, and how to pivot towards success. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.